Hey, welcome to another episode of Work in Progress. Can we really call these episodes? I don't know. But another block of work. Tonight we're doing a bit more work on, yes, you guessed it, the Future Sync conference. We've got a couple of updates that came in for the website today. Got to add a new sponsor logo. We got a couple of more speaker bios to add. And we've got... I forget, but I'm sure it'll come to me. My to-do list is here somewhere. So we're going to go through and add all stuff to the website in terms of speakers. So I'm going to get Atom up. And I've already downloaded, I believe, what we need. So it's Creative England. So we'll take that Creative England logo, we'll drop it in the sponsors packet folder. England.ping, file, reopen project. Look at that, it's opened up to the right one. So tonight we're going to listen to the First Contact podcast, and this is an episode all about the minds of trolls. Hey Google, play.
Initially, I was doing it because I wanted to keep thinking messaging for, continue the room. And then I woke up and I was sending rape threats to women journalists using fake accounts and wondered what happened and I doing it.
Who are the people who spread online disinformation? The so-called trolls that you hear about in the news, whose jobs are to distort facts and create chaos. I want to introduce you to someone who knows them well. Camille Francois. She's a security researcher.
Hey Google, volume up.
A lot of her time in the
Cool, so that's that one.
Camille is the Chief Innovation Officer.
Now we've had two more speakers come in today.
Identify and fight online disinformation. To give you some context, her team was a big part of helping us uncover the extent of Russian influence.
So we need to create start with the social...
a lot about trolls. Unlike most of the people talking about them and the damage they're causing, she actually spends a lot of her time talking directly to trolls to understand the why, who they are, and why they manipulate social media to distort the truth. I'm excited for you to get to know her. She's unsuspecting and quick to laugh, which I actually think is pretty powerful. To give you a sense, she just kind of roamed right into our production studio, a New York City high-rise with lots of security. No one stopped her.
No one asked me what I was doing there,
So don't underestimate her. She's taking on one of the most extraordinary threats of our time. And it's
no, we don't need to Twitter one, we need to speak on Meta Socials.
I had no idea when I sat across from her at a New York dinner party that I would leave asking myself a question that I want to pose during this episode. What is the key to fighting disinformation online? And some of the most alarming cyber threats coming in the future starts with empathy. I'm Lori Siegel, and this is First Contact. So welcome to First Contact. I'm super excited to have you here.
I'm super excited to be here. I have to say, I love the name of the podcast. I'm a huge startup fan, so First Contact.
Oh, I love it. I love that. And, Well, first of all, I should do kind of a quick intro to you, and which will probably play into like why you like Star Trek, right? And just like your background is really, really cool and interesting. You spent your whole career kind of at this intersection of cybersecurity, public policy, and human rights. You've worked for the French government, advised governments on all sorts of policy issues. And then you were a principal researcher. I've seen at Jigsaw, worked at Google many times. Jigsaw, this is this think tank and technology incubator within Google. And now you're the chief innovation officer at Graphica, right? Is that
That's right.
so? I mean, you've essentially spent your whole career digging into fascinating, interesting issues around cybersecurity and human rights.
Yeah, I really love that. You know, when I
Cool.
went to school, I said, I think this is what I want to do for a living. It's like intersection of human rights and tech and geopolitics.
So that's that one, and the other is the last speaker on software.
I think I really like that, being able to work on these issues for so long.
And so, how we start with our first contact is we talk about our first contact. Our first contact happened at a dinner party, right? I guess we should say to our listeners that we were at a dinner party where no one could talk about what they did, which is, I guess, this new concept of like we're not defined by what we do, although what you do is just the coolest thing in the world and it's so badass. But we sat across from each other and everyone guessed. We were sitting around a table and everyone was like guessing what you did. Do you remember what people were saying?
Yeah, it was really fun. So for the dinner, I brought a bottle of natural wine, biodynamic.
Cool.
And that's kind of the only thing that you know people knew about me, and so they were like, well, you obviously you
We
work
are
in the
getting
wine
there.
world, and I think I get that because I'm French. And then some people were like, no, she works in sustainability, which frankly is kind of true given what I actually do. I work on the sustainability of our conversations online. I don't think this is where they were going with it. But yeah, that's what they said. I don't know what you got. What did people say about you?
There's this weird guy next to me that kept saying everyone was a dancer. Do you
Yeah,
remember
that's
that?
true.
That was super weird.
I thought you were doing something super specific. I'll come back to me.
No,
I thought you were a diplomat or something like that. Like I had something super specific for you.
I will totally take that. And I'm forgetting what I said, but I think I could do like managed chaos or something. But
Also true.
yeah, but I mean, what people didn't really realize is like sitting around this small dinner table was like someone who's at the forefront of fighting disinformation in nation states and who
How
works
far
in the dark
update
corners
this
of the
photo, isn't it?
web and sees the craziest stuff ever. And I don't know if this is like the right thing to say because like I hate when dudes do this, but like you do seem really unsuspecting, right? Like, you know, like we were just joking about how you kind of social engineered your way into this building, like we didn't come get you in time, and like you kind of like
no one asked me what I was doing there. So.
right? You're like this. You come in with this like cute shirt that says facts, and like no one questions you. You just have this like this ability to understand. And I have. I'm gonna go somewhere with this. You have this.
Okay, so we got
clear
those downloaded.
quality about
Just
you.
need to.
And I think that's what a lot of people picked up on at the dinner table. And I think that might be, if I could say anything, what is kind of your competitive edge when it comes to what you do for your day job.
Yeah, you know, I think people don't realize that empathy today is a critical component of cybersecurity. A lot of people have thought in order to do cybersecurity right, you need to be really good at like managing tubes, breaking tubes, you know, managing networks. I think today we realize that if you want to secure systems, secure conversations, secure the way we live online, you really have to have an empathic heart and to understand the types of threats and how they evolve.
Like, so can we get really quick into, because I want to go back to your background, but just so people know, like, what is your day-to-day? Like, I just envision you in an office, like, fighting troll farms online and making sure democracy isn't ruined. But I don't know what that actually looks like. So I know big tech companies call on you to help with these different campaigns, and you've had some pretty high-profile reports that have helped us understand the extent of Russian influence. But like, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah. Well, you know, first I don't do this by myself. I'm very lucky that I get to manage a really fantastic team. Yeah, people coming from like different types of backgrounds, and so together
Now we do
we
Mexicans.
analyze online conversations. And we look for markers that they're being manipulated. Now, what's really fun in 2020 is, you know, we tend to think when conversations are manipulated, it's either trolls or bots or Russians. But today, there's quite a big diversity of actors and ways in which people manipulate public conversations. And so we investigate. because we want to be able to have more people see that and to have a public that's better informed and better equipped to tackle these threats, we also build tools to make that easier. So we have an R&D lab. They just do scientific research on how can we better detect patterns of manipulation of online conversation.
So you can essentially see it coming, understand if people are being manipulated, understand kind of who's behind it, and try to stop it. So I'm going to put it in this way of how I love to look at the hacking community and security researchers. And I got really fascinated in the security community years ago. I went to Black Hat and DEF CON for the first time. And for our listeners, those are like hacker conferences in Las Vegas. So if you could just imagine a bunch of like security researchers like who are finding vulnerabilities online and like in weird Vegas hotel room. I mean, it's just such an interesting community. And I remember my first exposure to it. I was like, whoa, these people are like these modern day superheroes, right? Like they have the ability to fight the bad guys online, and they have this skill. Like they can, as we talk about social engineering and you being able to kind of walk in here and understand how computer systems work, like you could use this skill for bad or for good, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember going to Black Hat and DEF CON for the first time, and everyone had code names.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Like, is that a thing in your community?
It's funny
Like,
that you say that because last year I was at Black Hat with Bruce Schneider and Eva Galperin, and our panel was, please use your skills for good.
I mean, like, back like 6 or 7, 8 years ago, it was like, even when I started going to these hacker conferences, it was like, if you found a vulnerability or if you started saying, hey, this isn't good, you could get into trouble for saying it.
That's good, yeah.
Right? And there was something very anti-establishment about
Okay,
being that
so
person
we've
who was
got
fighting the bad guys and who was calling attention to this and who was kind of
those
saying
in
this. I mean,
there.
do you have a code name?
No, I have I mean, yes and no. It's not the greatest fun name. I go by Chemtronics.
Okay, so
It's
like,
like
yes.
easy. Well, I mean, like it's
Yeah.
not the most.
Okay, now we go to our JSON.
Yeah. What does it mean?
Chemtronics.
Yeah, like what was behind it?
You know, I can't even remember. It's been with me for.
And data up.
It's followed me around. Yeah.
That's interesting. Right. So, but there was, I guess what I'm getting at is there was always this spirit of a community that had a lot of conviction and wanted to do something and raise awareness. And so now we're in this certain moment. And so I guess I'm curious about your background. Like before we get into like all the stuff you're doing to help fight kind of this current moment in time, I'd be curious to know just like how did you get into all this?
And just, I'll answer that in a second, but I'm really interested in what you're saying about how this idea that initially was quite scary, right? Let's enable a bunch of kids to poke at the systems from the outside and find the holes in it. Kind of became our best idea for how to do security in a complex world, right? And I think what's really interesting is that model is going to apply to more and more questions. So I think a lot about biases in algorithms, right? So when machine learning makes decisions that are deeply racist or deeply sexist, right? And all those problems that we're seeing emerge, and frankly, we don't have a lot of solutions to tackle. Could the model of the bias bounty also be applied there, right? How many more learnings can we draw from the hacker mindset and from the security community? How we do security in an age where we have more complex problems with technologies, right? I think there's a lot of innovation and promising areas to explore there.
That's interesting. So tell me about how you got into this. Were you always kind of a free spirit?
I mean, who answers me that question?
Some people.
I'm French, so
yeah.
you know, like, no, I don't know how I really got into this.
Got to prep it, so we need BR.
I grew up in France, and very quickly I realized that the questions that I wanted to ask and that took me to the US to ask and to work on.
So like take me back there. Like were you tinkering? Were you like playing on the internet? Were you in weird chat rooms?
Okay, I'll tell you the truth. Yeah, I was a very optimistic person, and I still am. You know, like my kids, like oftentimes I'm the most optimistic person looking at like the darkest stuff.
Right.
I was really excited by the promises of the internet. I really thought that the internet was going to bring democracy, was going to bring more diversity, was going to connect us to one another. I was just really excited. about the promise of the internet.
Why?
Perhaps it's a generational thing.
Was it just how
And
you were
so-
raised? Like, was it just you loved
No,
the spirit of it?
Yeah, I love the spirit of it. I loved it. I remember, when my father got me my first computer, I just thought it was magic. And so I think the first, projects that I worked on were just so extraordinarily optimistic. So I remember with a close friend of mine, we had this project called Citizen Wi-Fi, and we were knocking on doors around Paris, and we were asking people, could you remove the password on your Wi-Fi so that everyone can connect to your Wi-Fi, and we'll give you a little sticker that says Citizen Wi-Fi. I mean, it's not remove the password, it's like create guest network, so that more people can access the internet, and you're part of the guest Wi-Fi community, which, again, was very extraordinarily optimistic idea of just like, let's put more people online and things are going to be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I really come from a background that looks at the internet with very, very optimistic, cheerful eyes.
I
still do. Way after all the crazy stuff I see, I still, I still have hopes for what digital technologies can bring to society.
Well, I also saw you wanted to be a space baker, which I don't even know what that is. What on earth does that mean? Because we're gonna get into Russian influence and fighting the bad guys, but I feel like we have to start at some point with space baker.
Like Neelix and Voyager, or Quark Deep Space Nine. You just have like a little bakery or a bar, and you're on a space station, and you make croissants. It's kind of nice. You meet people from everywhere. You're like, hey, which quadrant are you from? Do you want a croissant today? Like just like a nice little space baker.
By the way, no. It's not that I'm like speechless. I'm just like, wow, what an interesting dream. Like, I wanted to be a Broadway actress. Unfortunately, I didn't really live into that version. But I wish I were cool enough that was my dream to do that. I love that. And so you ended up going and getting a degree in human rights and international security.
Yeah, that was far from the space baking.
Yeah,
the space baking work was not straightforward.
Yeah, was there a certain moment that you were that dream was crushed? Was there any indicator that was a good idea?
No, I'm just really bad at cooking.
Right.
That's like
you're in a safe space.
Yeah, I'm just so bad at it.
Well, it's good because the things you're good at we really need right now, which is like fighting really bad guys online. So you ended up getting a degree in human rights and international security, and you ended up going to DARPA eventually. Can you tell us a little bit about your work there?
Yeah, I mean, that was a long time ago. It was a project that I was working on at the end of my grad study, and it was just looking at privacy and security. I had a very conservative cybersecurity professor at Columbia who told me a history, and I told him, I'm really not a very radical hippie, and when I'm telling you about digital rights, I really don't think it's very radical. I think it's just really something that needs to be heard and discussed. And I was telling him, like, I'm really concerned by the growing gap between national security discussions on one end and what I consider to be important digital rights and human rights security discussion on the other end, and I think more should be done to bring digital rights, to bring human rights at the core of how we discuss cybersecurity.
What does that mean? Can you explain that a little bit?
Privacy. Privacy is a good example, right? So you had a lot of conversations on what do we need to secure the internet from bad guys, and none of these conversations, I think it's back then, right? I think we're in a much better place now, but a few of these conversations consider that privacy was a very important element of that, right? It was, I think, back at a time where most people considered that there was a tension between privacy and security. Honestly, I think we've gone a long way since then. And today, I think there's a recognition that privacy and security go hand in hand, right? If you have a system, that ekes out private information on people, that also is a system that's easier for hackers to exploit. And so I was, working on these topics, and my professor was like, okay, fine, we'll I know a project that could use a hippie, and then you'll just get to work on this project as a student. So yeah, that was fun.
We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, but when we come back, Camille talks about her work on the front lines of terrorism online and how ISIS was actually really good at micro-targeting. Also, if you like what you're hearing, make sure you hit subscribe to First Contact in your podcast app so you don't miss another episode. And you also worked at Google, and specifically Jigsaw, right?
Yeah.
Which is, for folks who don't know, it's kind of I think is really an interesting part of the company, which is where a lot of this technology, humanity, this like think tank of sorts, where a lot of problems like AI bias and some of these efforts to counter extremism, a lot of the people who are working on these problems are in that realm, and you were kind of at the forefront of that. So what did you find there?
Yeah, it was really fun working on these issues.
By the way, I love that you say it's fun. Like you work on like counter extremism, so like you're like probably spending lots of time looking at ISIS recruiting videos.
Yeah, but you work on these issues with people who really care about solving them and who are keenly aware of the different trade-offs. And that I think is a very fortunate position. Working inside Google on these issues also meant like working on an organization who really wanted to get to the bottom of it and with colleagues at Jigsaw, but also, frankly all across Google in engineering and policy, who wanted to make a dent in the problem, who were willing to experiment with creative and innovative ideas, and who also had a very clear picture of the trade-offs, of the constraints, of making sure that we don't go on the other side of the line, making sure we protect freedom of expression as we think through these problems. So yeah, it's a privileged position to work on these issues. For
What
sure.
were some of the, even you worked on a research program to counter online propaganda, so can you tell me, like, what were the issues that you saw? Like, what did you kind of come up with?
Yeah, so it's a program that was called the redirect method.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I was really interested in when we started, thinking through this project is, what do people think about, okay, terrorist propaganda, you have to just remove the content. It's a great first step, right? Indeed, there's content that's harmful, sometimes illegal, it should be online, and so we work to detect it and we have to take it down. It doesn't, solve the problem, and you still have issues with the questions, right? Like, there's still users who are coming to your platforms and they're saying, like,
nice one, Radislav.
Consume, a piece of content that you've removed, and this is where the redirect method operates, right? Like, when you have users who come and who are looking for content that is no longer there, do you still have an opportunity to reach out to them and to propose something else? Now, you don't want to trick them into something else, right? So you really do want to redirect and propose, hey, here's a playlist of alternative content that you think might be interesting. So you want to find the most transparent way to do that, and you want to find the most sort of clever way to do that. Again, avoiding all the potential traps that are all around this question.
I mean, it was I remember covering it and thinking this is such an interesting idea. Like, I didn't realize that you were behind that.
It really was, teamwork from a lot of researchers who, as you said, like, were really close to the question, right? The idea was you had to sit with people and really understand when you end up in a rabbit hole of consuming terrorist propaganda, what led you there? Right?
By the way, I don't think people understand. Maybe this is me having done a documentary on like someone from ISIS who was killed in a drone strike. He was kind of a hacker type, and one of the things he was actually in charge of their social media. His name is Jimmy Hussein, aka Trick. Maybe you've heard of him, but like I remember he was in charge of their propaganda stuff. And I remember like thinking like, oh my god, like he's making this is gonna sound really weird to say. We might have to cut it. Like he makes ISIS look very human, but he makes ISIS out to be like punk rock. Like, these rap videos and like these videos that are so compelling. And so I'm sure, and very human. So when vulnerable people are going to look at these videos, like, and this is where I think the human thing comes in.
Yeah.
It's like, we all sit here and we think, like, these people are crazy, they're going to join ISIS, or these people are crazy, they're Russian trolls, or whatever it is.
Cool, so that's been added, so now we can go to GitHub to merge that branch.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know who was really, really good at micro-targeting, though?
Who?
ISIS.
In what sense?
What was really interesting is we tend to think that terrorist propaganda is just one big thing, where it's like one bucket of very clear graphic imagery. But what we're observing actually is tailored narratives targeted at very specific community, very specific people, right? It was, you don't convince the young British girl the same way than you convince, a Chinese Muslim and online. It's just the much more nuanced and subtle and microcosmic picture that we often imagine.
And so you left and joined Rakapad, and then your first assignment seemed like a pretty significant one, right? You were involved in like a super secret project for the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Can you just like give us don't give us the company line. Like tell me like when they came to you, what did they say? Like what was the mission?
At that stage, I had been working
Cool.
in interference for a little while already, and so I was already pretty obsessed with it. And I remember actually when my boss called me, the CEO of Graphic called me and said like, "Hey Cam, what if like we had all the data from everything that the Russians have been doing across platforms, and we could really entangle and understand what's going on." Like,
Just gotta say, like,
no, it's perfect. What's
look at that amazing photo, right? Definitely need a haircut.
Yeah, John, that would be great. Just give it data box. That would be just super great.
Right, so we have added those in record time.
And yeah, that was
So while we've kind of got everything at the tip of our toes, tip of our toes,
what had happened. And I think we don't
we can get
and we still have gaps in our understanding of how it
account stuff updated, so we can download the rest of the speaker stuff.
It was extraordinarily exciting to be able to
Actually,
gathered all this data and really gave it to us.
while I'm here, I better check that the actual pages work, right?
I think my first instinct was, again, as I said, like at this stage, I had all this in my head, and so I was already looking for some pieces, and it was IRA data, and so I remember the first thing we did is I was like, oh, well, here are the things I expected to see in that data, and that are not there. And so it taught us very quickly that the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, the core part of the state, is one part of the
didn't put the talk title in.
And so
the head when the teacher becomes the student.
The GOU campaigns, right? We're lacking in the data set. And so it's been like this for 7 months before the report got public, and then again after, and honestly, continuing to be an endeavor, a puzzle having to figure out what really happened, what are the different entities involved in this campaign, how did this targeting take place,
So,
what is the exact relationship
offhand,
how did the platforms respond?
Off screen rather, I'm updating the individual speakers' links. Because we send out stuff via MailChimp, and we've got a lovely complex mail merge system, which just means we put everything in a spreadsheet, upload that to MailChimp, and then it's sorted. Okay, so let's get that one pushed up. Push it. Cool, so that's up there. So off screen, I'm just going to head to GitHub.
Against the Russian domestic population first, right? Against other populations in Europe, and also living in Canada and in Germany. And similarly, I think people were very focused on 2016, and we were able to demonstrate that it had been happening before, right? The Project Lockdown, the US.
Okay, so now when we go back to Ed's talk.
And in those 2 years before the election, there's a lot of fascinating detail of the Russians really learning to play the Americans, right? Like what are the hot button issues, like what are the triggers, what can we try, and so we also looked at those 2 years of experimentation.
While we're here, I'm going to make the card for this episode.
Russians are trying to freak out everyone, telling people that the turkeys that we buy at Walmart will have salmonella. Yeah, they do that. So there's just like a bunch of weird, bizarre.
What else? Let's keep going.
This is weird. Hoaxes that are fun. There's of course a famous case, that's also chemical that's been before. That one is 2014. It targets a small community in Louisiana. This one's interesting because it involves SMS. And so they're telling people relating to the vaccine officials saying a chemical plant has exploded, and they're trying to create panic. It works to some extent, as in it's reported it, and then the message circulates, but very quickly the local authorities say, actually that's a hoax, and it's not true, and they kind of move on, which, to be honest, I understand. I think in 2014 in Louisiana, if you were to have said it's a hoax and you think it's a Russian coal farm, I think you would have sounded insane around here. You know, but they did things like this for at least 2 years before the election. And of course, they continued targeting the American public after the election, right? So 2017 is a really interesting year, too, because people are talking about Russian trolls in 2017, right? It's a new reality. And so the Russian trolls themselves are making jokes about it, right? So you have fake profiles that start making
So it really bugs me. So I was talking to one of my,
about Russian trolls that is ridiculous. Next
I don't know, she would have been a mentee, but she's an industry friend now, I guess.
So they kind of like adapted to the narrative of the
About
Russian
the title junior software developer, and I think that whilst that's great, the title junior software developer, she didn't see herself as a software developer. She saw herself as a junior software developer. And my argument always was that you're a software developer, you're a software developer. Doesn't matter what your experience is. And it's just, it was really interesting to see how a label affected someone. It was a shame. It was a shame to see that. But hey ho, what do I know?
But I didn't coordinate with the rest of the industry. And so what really happened is the group went to Twitter and started complaining about having been kicked out of Facebook, saying, we're really upset that Facebook supports white supremacists. And then they started going on Google and they bought a lot of ads to redirect people to their new websites, so they had to direct the traffic away from Facebook because they had been picked up. And so 2017 is just like really sort of, surreal year for the Russian polls where they
Cool. So then we go to JPEG, download, and we just need those two. Should it go?
Doesn't really have their policy muscle either, so it's kind of a chaos and confusion for everyone, and then the Russian folks are talking about Russian coins and get to the meta.
And we can do the Instagram ones.
2019, we're also showing the difference. It's just like kind of a.
And so we've not used each yet, so we can
The Russian campaign is 1 year and one thing. I've seen it evolve over so many years and show so many different factors.
I'm going to replace.
Do you, when you interact with these people, out of curiosity, do you just sit in
Head
the
on
bar,
that
do you
one.
go, do you have like an undercover name or something
Make
where
that
you're
blue.
talking to Russian trolls as someone else? Like, what's your deal?
So
I'm going to replace Wendy on that one with Adult Snap, just to keep them a little bit more gender balanced.
It's funny that you mentioned undercover. That's not the type of work I do.
Not that everybody on this card identifies as having a gender.
The Russian Net Research Agency is because a young Russian journalist went undercover and published everything she could find.
Cool.
And she did that quite early on Facebook. It's interesting. It's an interesting reminder that honestly the activist communities and the investors
I'm going to put Gareth on that one.
and really went to great lengths to
I'm going
document
to
it.
put they on that one.
You said,
In pink, and that is all about the colour of the hexagons.
What did you mean by that?
A lot of that is really about understanding sociotechnical
Cool.
systems, right? So when you think about information operations, it's not really like hacking, right? It's not looking for technical vulnerability. It's looking for social vulnerability. It's looking for what's going to play well into society's division. What's going to fall in between two rules that a platform has and that's going to make them not attached, right? A lot of this is really playing with social systems as much as it is playing with technical systems.
Speaking of the humanity of it, you talk about kind of bringing a hacker mindset to the data security problem, and like what I think is so interesting about you is you wouldn't like talk to trolls, right? Like we have this whole misconception: who are these people who are doing this? Like in America, we're like, oh, the Russians are trying to mess with democracy, and you actually, maybe this is just me selfishly as like a journalist who like loves to talk to the other side and like loves to talk to the dark corners where people aren't looking and hear the other side. You did that, right? Like, take me into that. So you actually found people who were working in Russian troll farms and you talked to them?
Not just Russians. I think that I was always very interested, and I think that brought that mindset to my work. I was really interested in understanding more from the other perspective. So yeah, I talked to trolls and hackers who made a living doing disinformation, and propaganda for hire.
But like, take me into the rabbit hole. How does one decide to do that? Like, are you sitting at your desk and you go to these people? How do you even get in touch with these people? Like,
And again, it's so different.
yeah.
And you know, as a journalist, you get that right. Like every story is very different.
Well, that's why I know it's really probably challenging. So you've got that's why I'm kind of sitting here being like props. Like, how do you like give me some specific examples? Like, is there any people that really stick out to you that you spoke to that just surprised you from?
I mean, they're all fascinating stories. I have to say, I've heard so many different stories that I would really struggle to pin it with one brush. Things that come to mind. And I've talked to a hacker who did propaganda for hire all across Latin America, and that was way before people were worried about Russian profiles. You know, it was more, the entire disinformation for hire calls and bots and fake profiles
Cool.
in Latin American politics.
Other two.
I've talked to people
In what sense? Like, who you?
No, Instagram, speak stories. God, my throat's killing me.
Was it patriotism? Was it just money? Like,
why do people work in political campaigns?
Right.
There was the shtick.
yeah.
Like, you know, you were assembling a political campaign, you were getting your communications specialist, you were on the side who can bring you a little army of fake profiles and you got some hope.
Right.
They're like maybe news stories and stuff like that. Pretty successful in it sadly because she got that woman in jail. Oh, yeah, this is a whole story. It's interesting because the campaigning angle came a few times here. So talking to people who went into doing digital campaigning and really by patriotism to support their candidates, right? And slowly saw the campaign apparatus evolve into, like you say, propaganda machine after the candidate became in power. And so there are two stories like this of people who said, initially I joined because I wanted to do campaign messaging for, for the candidate to win. And then I woke up and I was just sending rape threats to women journalists using fake accounts and wondered what happened. What am I doing here?
Someone said that to you.
Yeah.
Wow. What did they say? They were just
that, like that it's flipped. That they went in for one thing, and that with the success of the candidate and the evolution of the machinery, they ended up just really doing something else.
Can you give any details about the candidate that this person, like, it was this?
That was a story that happened in India.
Wow.
But again, like I've heard that a few times, and I think that the story of doing something for political reasons that ends up sort of like putting you in the middle of the machinery that's no longer what you had joined is one that's more common than you think. There's also been other researchers who've done great ethnographic samples of people. Someone specifically who comes to mind is a friend who wrote a book called The Architecture of Disinformation that looks at what happens in politics. And it's really fantastic because he's talking to people who self-identify as doing this activity. They don't say journalists, right? They don't say I'm a poet, but they say, yeah, I make my living by having a lot of fake profiles, and if you're a candidate and you want to pay me for this activity, I will do that. And I think in his work, what you see come through is a question on when did that become an illegitimate activity, right? Like we need a real business of people who do this for hire. And who suddenly were told like you're a phone, you're going to be deactivated. And I think part of what you hear when you talk to people on the other side is, okay, wait a minute, because I've been doing that for a little while and I thought it was okay.
Right.
Yeah, I was,
Did you ever find yourself really liking these people?
Yeah, that empathy for, and again, like first different tragedies, right? Like you have empathy for someone who works for a candidate and suddenly says like, what am I doing here? And
Did you ever learn about how they learned how to pose as American? Like, what's the secret sauce? Like, what is the secret sauce to posing as an American these days online? I mean, I'm sure it's changed over the last couple of years, and it might not be rocket science, but
no, actually, it's fairly complicated. So we know a lot about how the IRA learned how to pose as an American, right? And as I said, like, this is where the early days of the IRA are really fun, because this is when they have to learn, right? This is why they're playing around with, like, oh, how much can we freak people out by talking salmonella and turkeys around Thanksgiving, right? Like, this is them trying to figure out, like, where America's top right now. We know that we're watching House of Cards, which I still think is hilarious.
They were watching House of Cards. Okay, how do you know that? They just tell you this?
It's in a defector testimony. But really, here the legal indictments have a lot of sort of like crazy details on everything that the IRA did to sort of like learn to be American, right? So we know they took field trips. It's part of how some of the employees ended up being indicted because they entered the country with tourist visas, and I think a few years after the government was like, okay, you're here for tourism. So we
Like a troll farm field trip to America?
It's a troll farm field trip.
I wonder what they did on their field trip.
To, you observe people, you understand how they act, what they talk about. They were also looking at their social media metrics very closely, right? So whenever they were trying out a new post in a group, they would take notes on what's performing, what's not performing. They were talking about how to target specific groups and other groups. And of course, I think the thing that we tend to forget is they were also targeting Americans, right? They were talking to Americans. They were using their fake personas to have long dialogues with American activists on all sides of the spectrum, saying, hey, what do you think about? What does the community think about? How are we going to do an event together? Yeah. And so, honestly, they were doing serious research.
We've got to take another quick break, but when we come back, it's not just Russia using sketchy social media tactics. Could American political candidates be using fake accounts to win your vote? And if you have questions about the show, comments, honestly, anything, you can text me on my new community number, 917-540-3410.
When has your voice gotten in your way? When we open our mouths to speak, the voice that comes out can reveal a lot about us. Where we come from, who we want to sound like, and who we don't, and how much we believe, or we've been told, that we deserve to be heard. Now iHeartRadio has its first podcast about how we talk, called Permission to Speak, with me, Samara Bed. I'm a coach for political candidates, actors in Hollywood, entrepreneurs and creatives pitching their big ideas, humans trying to express themselves and bring something real and authentic into the public sphere. And now I get to have that conversation with you every week, with brilliant guests sharing their vocal drama and practical advice on how to use your voice to get what you want. Listen to Permission to Speak on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you ever worry, just because I know you're kind of in these dark corners of like, dealing with troll farms, GRU, like, I mean, also like real, like well-funded governments who are trying to influence outcomes in some of these very dangerous ways. Did you ever worry, maybe this is an extreme question, but about your safety?
Yeah, that comes to mind. It comes to mind, yeah. I, try to be expensive with that time, and so don't worry about it too much, because we work with a lot of people who are, I mean, it's not a race, but, thinking about people who are much greater personal risk that also have some higher retirement.
What does that mean?
So someone I've worked really closely with, years on these questions of race would be amazing, familiar with them.
Cool. So, oh dear. So that's Instagram stories.
She's been arrested so many times. She's been targeted so harshly by her government that, sure, sometimes I worry about my own safety, but I think more often than not, I worry about that of my friends as well.
Yeah. So many of these disinformation campaigns, the idea is also to silence people. And as women, I mean, I guess it's a lot of it is also silencing women and silencing female journalists and whatnot. It's not supposed.
Silencing is definitely a key goal. I'm glad that you're bringing this question because besides my own safety or that of my friends, I am very passionate about how do we build technology to protect users from very well-founded and well-researched threats, right? When you think about it, it's a very difficult problem, right? Like, what can you do when you know that a journalist is targeted by a nation state? There's a little known feature, I mean, outside of the security circle, but this feature is really near and dear to my heart, called the state-sponsored warning. And I've been working on and looking thinking all about this. Sometimes when a platform knows that as a user you're being targeted, they would actually give you a little notification that says, hey, you think you're being targeted by a state actor. Why don't you go and do this thing, right? Change your password, enable two-factor authentication, etc. And I think a lot about how much we should celebrate these systems, and not much, but they're almost the only things that exist sometimes, and how much we should invest in making sure they're as
Cool. So we've got
Oh,
those.
by the way,
Actually,
if
speak.
you've ever received a state-sponsored warning in your inbox and you have thoughts about like your experience and want to talk about it, shoot me an email. I love to hear this.
I mean, by the way, first of all, can we just take a step back? Like, how scary would it be if you're just like checking your email and you get like a state-sponsored warning?
You know, it's really fun. I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and
It's so strange. I mean, I think it's great. Like, I love that you talk about like taking on ISIS propaganda, and you're like, this is fun. You talk about someone getting a state-sponsored warning, and you're like, this is so fun. I'm like, no, you're right. This is terrifying.
It is horrifying, but it's probably not the right word. But the thing is, what's really interesting is that people have such different reactions to it, right?
But it's important, right? I would rather not 100% want to know.
It's extraordinarily important, which is why, like, I have met users who tell me, like, yeah, we received this, but, we think it's a drill. The thing that really platforms tell us that just to keep us on our keep it toes, and I'm like, no, it's not a drill, right? If you receive that warning, please know this is not a drill. You really do have to think about your security. You really do have to enable two-factor authentication, do those things, right? But you also have users, frankly, who it's been so terrifying and often sometimes so tragic that this becomes a symbol for them, right? So like people have very different reactions to it, and for some it really is sort of the the beginning sign of a journey that can be quite horrifying and frightening and tragic. Yeah.
As someone who spent a lot of time with
Alright.
that influencing the election, who's
So-
spent so much time, like, what are we missing? I know I watched
Oh, we're here.
in research for this, I
And
took
please
some time and
excuse me
watched
for
the
one
tests on
moment.
it, and I just felt like,
Relentless
I
march of
see
Instagram
talking about
stories
everything missing.
requires
It's not
my
just the
attention.
IRA, we're talking about the GRU, like, and how this is very well-funded government-backed campaigns, and we're not really talking about that. How also we're not even measuring like private messages of people being targeted. Like, I just think there's so much talk about one thing right now. And my concern, as someone who covers this kind of stuff, is that we just don't even look at other things, and we scream about the same things a lot, which is important, but we don't look at other things. So I thought those two things were really interesting. If you don't mind getting into them a little bit, and then like, what's the other stuff that you think we should be talking about?
Yeah. The first thing is indeed, we've talked so much about the IRA. And that's great. I mean, I say this as someone who's very deep down this rabbit hole. I would talk about the IRA day in and day out and for months and months without stopping. But it's not the only factor in foreign influence. And a lot of people, when they say foreign influence, really, their mental model is what the IRA did in 2016, which again doesn't acknowledge that there were many other actors. Russian actors, right? So the GRU played an important part. There are other Russian entities who participate in foreign interference and information operations that are very seriously on, other governments. So the first campaign by the Iranian regime targeting U.S. audiences, I think, starts in 2010, right? The first foreign interference on social media campaign. So a lot of this was happening also before we kind of like woke up to it. So there's a lot more actors than just the IRA, and frankly than just more Russia, both on the foreign side and also as we talked about, right, on the domestic side. That's one thing. And yes, as you said, I am more
Didn't do the sponsor stuff for Creative
full picture
Angerland.
of how that specific election campaign worked. and that there's still a lot that's missing from the record. In working with activists who have been targeted, we looked at the messages that they received, and we never talk about those messages, right? When we think about the Russian interference, we kind of feel like, yes, it's a bunch of tweets who had to be a little bit out of the loop to retweet the Russian troll. This is not what happened, right? Some people were targeted personally and worked with fake personas for months and months and organizing events together and discussing political life. And I think we don't talk about that nearly enough. I think there's still lacking important evidence from the record. And, I've worked with activists whose messages are going to disappear, right? They only have their side of the story. But trying to piece all of this together is still, I think, an important endeavor.
What do you think is the biggest threat going into 2020?
Ourselves.
What do you mean?
Disinformation is really important. It is true that there's foreign interference, but it's been very odd to see the pendulum swing so hard. In 2015, when I was saying, I think there is such a thing as patriotic trolling, right? I think governments are actually doing these information operations on social media. I think there is such a thing as Russian trolling. It was kind of like, yeah, really? And now, every time there's something, people see Russians on their beds everywhere, right? Like, everything is disinformation, everything is foreign interference. And I don't think that's helpful.
And what about, on the home front? I think, you said something really interesting in one of the testimony about kind of this gray area of campaigns. And you said, I think because of our lack of serious dialogue on what we're willing to accept on social media or not, we're going to find an increasing amount of gray area situations as we head into 2020. Candidates, parties, PR firms, are we going to see troll farms from actual candidates? Are we allowed? What's happening behind the scenes?
It's like two different problems, right? The first one is people don't have a good grounding on what is normal campaigning. I give you a specific example. In the midterms in 2018, there was a candidate who had his supporters install an app, and the app would give you an off token access to your accounts, and then will help all the supporters tweet the same campaign message at the same time. But you would still have to install it on your phone, and you would have to give the token to the app, right? When that happened, people completely lost it, being like, oh my god, look at these, this is the Russian trolls, they're back, all these messages are doing the same thing at the same time, they're bots. And it was really straightforward to see that it was not bots, and it was not Russians, and it was just people using a campaign app, right? Because we actually sort of lack, serious grounding on what normal people do in the course of the campaign, we're prompt to overreacting. And so there's a need for a debate on what is okay for a campaign to do? Is it okay for people to download an app and sort of give their account to their candidate? Is it okay to use fake accounts? Is it okay to automate some of that activity? And on the other side, because candidates in campaigns don't really talk about this, you do have a lot of terrible ideas that are floating around. I do see people who think it's a great idea to have a little troll farm set up for 2020 with a lot of fake accounts that are just going to, help amplify this or help to drown that out.
Do you think candidates now actually have, some candidates could actually have troll farms on their own now? Knowing what we know, do you think that there could actually be troll farms here in the United States for candidates?
Yes.
In more detail.
I'm worried that this is not a discussion that we're having with campaigns and parties and candidates. That being said, I think it's slowly heading in the right direction. I was very encouraged to see Elizabeth Warren's disinformation plan that does say to my supporters and to my campaign, these are the things we won't do, right? It doesn't get deeply into the details, but I think we're going to need more of that.
Did she say that they wouldn't do that?
So we can pull up the details of the plan, but it has a section of it that addresses this type of behavior on social media that she discourages from her supporters. I don't think it specifically talks about the use of fake accounts, which is interesting. I think a lot of other concepts were kind of misunderstood, right? So bots is a traditionally misunderstood concept that leads to more complex discussion that people don't really want to have, right? It's like, what is the role of automation? What part of your activity can you actually automate? What part of it is legitimate automation? What part of it is undesirable automation?
Are you seeing, I don't know details, but are you seeing, like, in the US, like, are you seeing candidates or people associated with candidates have bots or troll farms or that kind of stuff?
So far, I don't think that we've seen candidates and campaigns sort of like officially do that.
Yeah.
What we have seen is a lot of people thinking it's a good idea to use fake profiles to do political messaging, right?
Yeah.
How much is that at the candidate's direction, at the campaigns, sort of like, right? I'm hoping that we won't see more of that. But again, I think a little bit more of a clear discussion on the rules of the road in this area would be helpful.
I remember I interviewed Asa Raskin for this podcast, and he said he thought in the future a threat could be. This is my maybe very Black Mirror, so just go with me and then pull me back. But saying that in the future a threat could be, a bad actor using AI, taking a combination of the faces of the 5 Facebook people you use the most, or you talk to, you interact with the most, and targeting you with a face that you automatically trust. Almost like you just kind of trust this face because it's a face that you're almost more used to. Your brain just kind of registers it. Do you think we could see something like that?
Yeah, I think the technology is already on the table for that, which is interesting. We recently did a report. We called it FFS. I think for fake faces swarm was the official name. And it was a really interesting report because it looked at a very large campaign of fake profiles that use generative adversarial networks with, basically like AI to create fake faces from scratch. And so all these profiles had these fake faces that were generated by AI. And we realized, wow, this is something that we really honestly thought was a little bit further down in our future that we're just seeing there. But on the other hand, the technology was there. It's very easy to do. It's available to anyone. It was honestly on this one, I think it was harder to detect than tools. There's still sort of telltale signs, right? So something that was interesting is when you create, or at least with that generation of generated adversarial networks, the symmetry of the faces was often wrong, right? So if you would have an earring on your left ear, the matching earring on the right would actually not match at all, right? So if you had a face wearing glasses, the left branch would kind of be off if you compare it to the left branch to the right one. So like there were telltale signs like this, but still I think there with a lot of the AI technology to generate these types of outputs, still it is still the case that it's easier to generate them than to detect them.
People argue that privacy is kind of a blurry concept. They say, I have nothing to hide. What do you say?
There's an entire book to be written about that. Yeah, that's not the point of privacy.
What is the point?
The point of privacy is preservation of society and intellectual independence, right? You don't have to have it all the time. You deserve your privacy. And, it's a fundamental value in democracy.
Kind of this next threat you talk about a little bit is not just deep fakes. Can you just take us to the idea it's refake?
Yeah. And so, people think about deep fakes a lot, right? So the ability for machine learning to generate a video from scratch of an event that never happened with a limited training data set. I think that's important and interesting. I also worry a lot about how that plays out in the tech space, right? So there are a series of classifiers, and GPT is one of them, and tools today who enable you to take a short training sample and to generate a lot of believable text based on that. And I worry a lot about how that does to the disinformation ecosystem, right? Because when you spend a bit of time studying troll farms and disinformation operations, they often have to produce a large amount of engaging and believable text, right? To sort of like put out on a various set of properties or online accounts or domains and fake profiles. And so I do worry a lot about that specific threat, which I personally think.
Okay,
how would it play out? Like, how do you see it playing out?
Well, if you run, for instance, a disinformation ecosystem where you have 200 sites that you're pretending have nothing to do with one another, it becomes much cheaper and easier for you to keep 200 sites sort of hydrated with fresh content.
Right.
I have a wonderful partner who is a bit cheeky, and he teaches kids to use sort of like deepfakes and retakes and all that. And I think that's actually sort of a good response. I think people should play with those tools and sort of understand what it can do, what it cannot do, and have sort of a lot more familiarity with these techniques so that they can more easily spot them.
Last question. You said you were an optimist, or at least in your Twitter bio, you're an optimist mind focused on dark patterns. Why, despite everything you've seen, are you so optimistic?
Because people are great.
What makes you, I mean, I guess I don't know if I ever followed to that. Why do you still think people are so great despite everything you've seen?
Because I think that a lot of what needed to be uncovered is hard to uncover. I think people worked really hard to demonstrate that this phenomenon existed. I think people worked hard to say, look, there are such things as full harm, this is how they work. I think people worked hard to say, yes, activists are targeted and this is what's happening. And I think despite the problems growing in complexity and in size, there's always been fantastic people chasing them, enslaving them, and coming up with creative solutions.
You work so closely with all the tech companies, so do you think they're well equipped to take on this next challenge?
Well, I'm much better off than a few years ago, for sure. We've come from far.
You're still optimistic.
I'm still optimistic. I mean, we are in a much better position, sort of like the tech industry in general, than when we were a few years ago. So I'm not perfect. There's a lot to do, both on like creating better rules, being better at implementing them, and creating technology to be able to do detection faster.
And maybe bringing more humans like you to the table. I would just say, like, adding in the people who actually have an understanding of humanity, because I think the thing that seems to keep going missing in the narrative is the human part. And maybe had we been paying attention a little bit more to the psychology of hacking and people and that kind of thing, and there were maybe more people in these tech companies at the time, maybe that would have been something we could have caught a little bit earlier.
More social scientists in tech, more diverse background in tech. Really can't go wrong with that recipe for sure.
So, what do you think? We hit on empathy, trolls, the dark corners of the internet, and a little bit of optimism. I would love to hear from you. Are you liking the episodes? What do you want to hear more of? I'm trying out this new community number, 917-540-3410. Text me. It goes directly to my phone. Promise, I'm not just saying that. And here's a personal request. If you like the show, I want to hear from you.
Alright, well, that's perfectly timed with that podcast. So we created our stuff. I'm going to go make a cup of tea, rest my eyes for a bit, and then I'll be back to do another batch of social media schedules. I think it's a realistic goal to get a bunch queued up. Certainly make sure we're hitting all of our sponsorship commitments, and then probably go to bed, to be honest. Alright, so let's stop this and get it uploading. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the next one.